And also, Sarah, can you also go to the live transcript on the bottom right and that ellipsis and it says live transcript enable? Is it on yet? Let's see.
Yes,
Yes.
I see it.
Okay. All right, we're live.
Okay.
So I'm looking on the panelists, the attendees, and Megan and Sally, and I think Marcos all need to come up as
Yeah, I tried promoting Sally and Megan.
there you go.
I'll keep trying. I think they have to accept it once I do it, so.
Right.
And I was gonna also allow Joe, since he always comes, and we know it's him and not a
I
Zoom
said
call.
it was just because it's Joe.
Just because it's Joe. So Joe, you can accept it if you want, but you don't have to. Okay, here he comes.
Also, Ben, I would say, we know him.
Yeah, he said he was busy making things and dinner and stuff, but I'll promote him. We'll make him join it. Okay. And just as a side note, if you are an attendee and you would like to speak, you can raise your hand. And if you would like, you can be a panelist as well. So just let us know in the chat or raise your hand. But other than that, I'll let you go ahead and kick it off.
Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone. The Affordable Housing Subcommittee of the Commission on Equitable Housing and Development meeting has now commenced. It is October 19th at 4:05 p.m. This meeting is being held virtually due to COVID-19 to allow for social distancing and protect the public health. As we continue our efforts in meeting remotely, we ask all commissioners and guests to mute yourselves until called upon to speak to avoid feedback and background noise. For those who have dialed in using the call-in number to unmute to speak, dial *6 on your phone. Also, prior to speaking, please announce who you are to identify yourself. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. We ask that you only use the chat function. Actually, I think the chat function has been disabled. Is that correct? Chat function has been disabled. In order to comply with open state meeting law, attendance and votes will be done by way of roll call using audio, not by using the chat function. Okay, so wait. So I'll take roll call right now. Of myself, Sharia Jimenez. Olga, did we get a confirmation about Olga being on the committee?
She is going to stay on the commission, at least last we were aware of.
Okay.
So she is full-fledged member.
And she started a new job today and she can't join us.
Oh, okay. Okay, so Olga Flores, Maggie Amaro,
Present.
Jim Toffel,
Present.
Mary Ann Bierling, absent. Well, we also have our ex officio. Is Corin on the call?
Corin said she was going to be a couple minutes late.
Okay. Marcos Ismail.
Good afternoon. I'm here.
Hi, Marcos. Betty Viegas, I don't see. Okay, and then we have our regular attendees. We have David Wall, present. Joe Audino. I see him, but I don't. Okay. Megan Headings. Okay. Joe says he's here on the chat. Sally Schwen. See, thank you. Jason Heisey, I don't see. And then we have Ben Carpenter with us as well. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move along to call to the audience. This is the time when any member of the public may address the Affordable Housing Subcommittee Due to time constraints, individuals are allowed up to 3 minutes each. And due to open meeting law, commission members cannot discuss topics that are not on the agenda. Items brought up by the public may be considered as an agenda item for a future meeting. Is there anyone who would wish to speak?
And Sherry, I think on this new format, if one of the attendees wants to speak, they can raise their hand and we can call on them. But we just want to make that clear. If an attendee does want to speak to call the audience, they can. They just have to let us know via raising their hand.
Okay.
Hey, Mary Ann just called. She's on the phone with me. Sarah, can you send her the link? She's having a difficulty registering.
I registered for it. It's not letting me on.
Okay. So you have the new link?
She sent me the
Oh.
link. What it tells me to do is register. It won't let me on. I can't get to a meeting.
I'll resend her the link, see what happens, okay?
Nesta's sending it to you now, Mary Ann. He'll resend you the link. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Thank you for everyone's patience. I knew it was going to be a little bit of a bumpy start. All right. So I don't hear any or see very many folks from the public. So we'll move on to the next item. Oh, that was Corin's item. So should we wait? It says update on IID proposal. That was going to be Corin. Should we move Corin?
Yeah, I would just skip her and then come back to her when she gets here.
Okay. So next on the floor then would be affordable rentals with Jim leading the discussion.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm gonna try to share my screen here. Oh, can you enable me to share?
Yeah. And
What's that?
Sarah Neto, feel free to make me a co-host. I'm happy to help too.
Sarah, you'll have to do that.
And
I made you a co-host, and I don't know where to go. Oh, here we go.
Okay, well, let's get started. So we basically what I was hoping we could talk about and kind of get consensus on today is we've spent, we went through a brainstorming session and tried to prioritize. Mary Ann's calling again. Ernesto, can you call Mary Ann? Do you have her number?
So yes. Mhm.
So I want to go back to the original thing that we were all working on as a group, which was what are the kind of the biggest recommendations that we can make to mayor and council to help incentivize additional affordable housing in Tucson. And so we had boiled it down to basically 3 recommendations. It went up to the commission. They came back with some questions and more further clarification. And then we've just never kind of gotten back to readdressing it as a group. So I think I sent everybody an email with the letter, and that's what I'm hoping to pull up, and we can go through it. And basically, if we have consensus on what we think this should be, we can vote on it, vote it through. That's my goal, is to vote that through today. So Sarah, do you want me to basically email this to you, or do you have it? The letter?
I'm gonna make
So-
you a co-host.
Yeah. Perfect.
Jim, once I make you a co-host, you should be able to share your screen.
There we go.
Thank you, everybody, for working through this with us.
Okay. Can you all see this?
Yes.
Okay, so this is, I basically wrote the letter. It's not dated. It would come from the Commission on Equitable Housing and Development. So if this subcommittee approves it, it's going to get kicked up to the overall commission, and hopefully they will in turn approve it as well, and we can forwarded on. So just for clarification's sake, do I need to read this because it's being recorded? No?
No, you don't.
Okay. All right. Well, basically, what it does is it just briefly goes through the what has been accomplished to date. So an impact fee waiver was passed for affordable housing projects. There's a parking reduction that's now allowed for affordable housing projects. The source of income discrimination ordinance, I think that was passed. If it has been passed, it's going to be shortly.
Yeah, it passed.
And then the fast track approval process for affordable housing projects through PDSD. So
Jim,
yeah.
that one has not been passed.
Okay, well, there's a provision. It's not an ordinance, it's a provision by BDSD. No? Should we
Oh.
take that off the list?
Yeah, that,
I
All right.
mean, it could be a recommendation if you so choose.
yeah, I think that's added to the next number 4 under HAS plan. Yeah,
Okay,
or I don't know if it was a HAS plan item, wasn't it? Yeah. I don't know what item number, but
okay. So the changes that the items that we're recommending that get addressed ASAP are basically all in line with the HAS plan. So I went through the HAS plan and I pulled out the specific sections of that plan. So the first item is to reinstate the Housing Trust Fund as a supplementary source of financing on all projects. And we're not giving a recommendation for the amount. Obviously, the more the better. But the city is in the position right now where it does have a surplus. So it has the ability to do some things like this when it hasn't in the past. We want to direct development services to review and change zoning regulations in order to encourage affordable housing projects. Specifically, we want them to pay attention to the project density, setback requirements, building height, and a more streamlined process for zoning changes. And this is basically some of the feedback that came out of the housing study that was conducted by the state, is that, you know, most developers will just take a pass on a site if it requires a zoning change. They don't even try to make it work because it's so rigorous, and it can be upwards of $100,000 to rezone a property with no guarantee of success. So HAS plan item 9.2 is to direct the staff to evaluate adding a bond measure for affordable housing to the ballot. So actually Flagstaff and Phoenix, I just learned last week, are currently working on similar measures. And we have a copy of that legislation that we could probably use as a starting point for Tucson. And then the last thing we just talked about. So the last item, which isn't really an ordinance or an action, but we want to make sure that the leadership in the city of Tucson, specifically mayor and council, is continuing to engage ADOH to get them on the same page as the city for the QAP. Because right now the QAP it allows certain area codes to have projects and not other area codes, and it's in conflict with what the city wants to do. Roughly half of the area codes in the city of Tucson do not receive the point bonus currently as shown in the QAP. So basically what ADOH did is they took all the zip codes where projects have been built in the last 10 years. And they said, if you're in one of those zip codes, you don't get 10 points. You don't get any points. Or if you are in one of the zip codes, you don't get any points. If you're outside of those zip codes, you get 10 points. And 10 points is a big deal on the LIHTC program. It's basically the difference between winning an award and not winning an award. So the result is the city of Tucson wants to push affordable housing in certain areas and the state is telling them that they can't, and we need to get the two groups on the same page. So I guess I'd like to open it up for comments and suggestions. Maggie?
So, these, suggestions are under the topic of, affordable rental. And then I'm supposed to talk about affordable homeownership, but I'm wondering, do all of these suggestions apply to homeownership? And I get confused because, first of all, it's under the affordable rental topic, and also because of that, the paragraph about LIHTC. And so, if we're going to be doing recommendations, should we make sure also that we are including all the measures that include affordable homeownership? I would like to also then add as a suggestion to, have mayor and council really prioritize, the community land trust model of affordable and permitted affordability in homeownership. I think that that's, we're here for a reason on this commission. And I think that, this our program is working. So that's just my comment. I just want to make sure that when we're talking about, incentivizing more affordable housing development, that it includes homeownership and not just, rental.
So when I wrote this, I intentionally wrote it in such a way for at least these three items so that it did not favor rental or homeownership. I think that all three of these items are beneficial, all four of them now, in fact, are beneficial for all types of affordable housing projects and are applicable for all four types of housing projects. This last section definitely is more oriented towards the rental programs. And that is something that needs to get addressed, because while the two are in conflict, it's going to make it harder to get anything done here on the rental side. But is there a specific change, I think, to these four items that you're thinking, or how would you like to state that?
Well, is this, I guess, I've been a voting member for I think one meeting now. So, I think, we brought homeownership up quite a few times. And I think that we also need to kind of really strategize on what suggestions should be made, because homeownership is actually what builds wealth. I don't really believe that we should be ignoring it because of our current, our current economic situation. I really still think that homeownership is a viable option. And I truly believe, and I think that the reason that we're here is the community land trust is a model that really is working, and it is about permanent affordability. And I would like to see mayor and council, this most successful community land trusts are the ones that are supported by their local municipalities. And so if we're making recommendations, very specifically, I would like to also, I feel like I'm really touting my own horn, and I got to stop feeling like that, because that's, I think, the reason I'm here, right? So I really feel that, our model has been working, and we were, birthed by the city of Tucson. And I still really believe that our local government entities need to see that our model is working and support it financially. So.
Okay, so what change are you requesting? I'm still not clear.
I would just add, I wouldn't change, but maybe add something along the lines of, I don't know, more financial support. I'm not addressing any of the plan items. But
how about this?
I'm actually thinking, like, very specifically promote community land trust.
Or
Okay,
Jim, you got some hands up.
yeah, all right, let's come back to that. I'm not sure what you want me to put here, so put some,
I-
think about it and let's.
I think what can happen is in that first paragraph, Community Development Department, community stakeholders, CHED recommends actions that will not only incentivize more affordable housing, rental and home ownership development. Putting that in there so that it's very clear up in front. You know, it's a comma, rental and, or in parentheses, you're saying rental and home ownership development in our community. And I think that what you said, Jim, in points 1, 2, 3, and 4, everything in the HAST plan would apply to home ownership in this case as well. And if we're talking about community land trust, there's 3 of them that, you know, exist. There's SALT, Piclet, and then also the South Tucson Land Trust that CASA Maria has developed. So there's several land trusts to be working with, and there's several agencies that are working with first-time home buyer and first-time home ownership.
Okay,
I want to add, though, that Southern Arizona Land Trust is, so what I'm talking about specifically is a community land trust. So SALT is not a community land trust. A community land trust is permanent affordability. We own the land, we sell the improvement, blah, blah, blah. All the subsidies in these homes are reused and recycled, thereby, you know, benefiting multiple homeowners. And so I'm actually, you know, I have to go look at the HAST, but I believe HAST mentions community land trust. And so I think I would like to have a direct ask to have the city support financially, city, county. I don't know how we would, I can look into that, but also just more, you know, financial support for the Pima County Community Land Trust or Community Land Trust if that doesn't sit well.
so Maggie, I've got an ask for you. Can you, this isn't a one-time thing. We can
Right.
develop more recommendations next month. Can you type up exactly what you want this to say and present it back to the group next month?
Sure.
Is that okay? And then
Yes.
we can follow up with additional recommendations. That's not a problem.
All right.
All right, Sharia?
sorry, let me unmute. Yes, so I actually had, thank you, because I think that will be much more clear to get that sorted out. I had a question about some thoughts about item number 2. I still think it's, when it comes to planning and zoning, it's still reading kind of broad. So I was wondering, and what I had taken away from our last meeting was that maybe potentially one of the asks could also be to get mayor and council to approve us working with that zoning consultant. And then us basically working through the zoning items in more detail, you know, for a series of, you know, the next 3 to 4 months. And then we already have that time slotted on the agenda. So that's how I was seeing us being able to work through more specifically those issues and come away with that with a very targeted list of policy changes and recommendations.
So on the HASS plan, item number, basically what this is saying is we want them to start working on HASS plan item number 5.
Right.
So if I can show you what that is. So this is HASS plan number 5. And so that's what item number 2 is referring to, is these 5 items that were already vetted out through the HASS plan.
Ah, okay. Well, that's helpful. That is much more specific. But either way, I thought that we still might want to add working through, I thought we had talked about adding Eco Northwest as a consultant in this process.
Well, they're working on it.
Yeah, they were working on that specific study, but not the rest of those items.
Yeah. I don't know that we necessarily want to say how to do it. I think we say
Okay.
what you want, we want you to do, and then they could figure out how to do it.
Okay.
And they'll come to us and ask for input if they start the process, I'm sure. Are you okay with that,
Yeah, that's fine.
Megan?
Thanks. Well, I was going to comment on something else, but I just have to comment on Maggie's. I don't disagree with her desire, and also that there's a great model in the Piglet model, but I would be remiss if I didn't say there's a number of organizations doing some great work for trying to get first-time homebuyers, low-income homebuyers into homeownership. And so I think I would love to see how you write that up, but I would request that it be slightly more broad than a direct funding request to one organization, because there's multiple ways of I believe, of us getting, having that affordability for home ownership. And so I would hope that we have an expanded view on that. And specifically, my organization is doing a lot of work as well in that arena. But Jim, I was curious about number one on the HAS plan. I thought that there was already some feedback about wanting to know where the potential funding would come from for that housing trust fund. Am I remembering that wrong? And did we need to expressly state where we thought those funds could come from?
Here, I'll pull that up. Okay, so this is item number 9. Evaluate revenue source options for reinstating a housing trust fund. So the tentative deadline for them to evaluate those sourcing options is the end of this year.
So did we need to say in the letter that, are we asking staff to do that? Or was there a necessary determination on that just needed to be clarified, or can we say it as is? Does that make sense? Who are we hoping is evaluating that revenue source options?
Sarah and Ann, can you help me with this one?
I'll take a stab and then I'll let Ann fix whatever I say. I think that, deep evaluation is gonna have to come from a staff level, right? But if you guys have surface level ideas, you can also just say, mayor and council evaluate a revenue source, and then they could, dictate to staff that. If you wanna be more specific, like Jim, you mentioned the bond, the Affordable Housing Subcommittee and Commission can recommend to direct council to look at funding, including a bond, and to be a little more specific if there's a one that you guys feel like would be a better or more successful funding option. But it can be as broad as, direct staff to look at it and not be specific. So it's kind of whatever you guys feel comfortable with moving forward. I think that's sort of the key in this case.
Is it true that the city has about $120 million surplus right now? I heard that thrown around last week.
Yeah, that's not true. It came from a article in the Tucson Star. So that article was misleading, and that's a kind way to put it.
Okay.
But I think what is true, two things is I do think the budget is an expression of your priorities. So I don't want to discourage you all from advocating for what you think is important. But that article that suggested there was $120 million surplus is incorrect.
Shay?
Yeah, the Department of, I know that the Transit Task Force, I think that's been meeting, they've been advocating for a line item in the budget for transportation, and I feel housing is equally important. And it should be something that we should be advocating for and asking for in the budget is a line item for housing, you know, I don't see what's wrong with just straight up asking for that in the city budget, as well as advocating for the bond financing. And you know, again, if transportation is doing it, I feel that it to me, housing and transportation are just those basic building blocks. I don't see why we wouldn't want to ask for that. But and then the other thing I was gonna say, kind of related to the bond, again, I don't know if this is too in the weeds or too specific, but when I was talking, I got to meet with Betty just one-on-one, you know, a few weeks ago, and just asking her about the history of how they got the last bond measure passed. And she said that one of the critical elements was that they had early on a bond attorney on board. And so having that bond attorney and getting some resources dedicated in our commission to that, I don't know if that needs to be done now or if we put that in the item, but that was another element I just thought I'd bring up.
Okay, any other comments or thoughts? I'm hoping somebody is willing to make a motion. So I
I'll make a motion that this be approved and sent, you know, to mayor and council as it stands, which includes affordable housing that is rental as well as home buyer, and that we don't get stuck in the weeds on anything else at this moment.
Okay, so if I could clarify that motion, Marianne, so I think we need this to get approved by the overall commission. So if I could, the motion should be that the Affordable Housing Subcommittee recommends that CEHD provide these recommendations to mayor and council.
That's correct.
Okay, is there a second?
I second.
Okay. Any other comments before we put it to vote?
Just thank you for doing this, you know, for everybody who worked on this. That's my only other comment.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so do you want to call the vote, Shay?
Yeah, so do I need to repeat the motion and then call to vote? Or just ask for the ayes?
So the motion is that the Affordable Housing Subcommittee recommends that CEHD provide these recommendations to mayor and council on how to incentivize additional rental and homeownership affordable housing development in our community.
Okay, so can we take a vote? All those in favor? Aye.
I think we have to do it via roll call.
Oh, okay, really? All right. Let me pull that up real quick. Okay, so myself, I'll say aye. Maggie,
Aye.
Jim Toffel.
Aye.
Marianne Beerling.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. So this will get kicked back up to our meeting tomorrow, actually, right?
Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate everyone's support on this. There's one last thing I would like to just quickly present, if that's okay. Just something. Maybe I should save this for the overall commission meeting. I'll save this for tomorrow. Well, I'll share it. What the heck? You guys have? Is it okay if I take another couple minutes of everyone's time?
Go ahead.
Okay. So I think everybody here knows that I've been pushing the state, the ADOH and the governor's office to make a significant investment into affordable housing. And the ask is upwards of $500 million. So the state recently put, I think it was 30 or $40 million into the Housing Trust Fund, which has been good. And that money has primarily gone to fill gaps on 9% LIHTC projects. There are a bunch of 4% LIHTC projects that are out there as well. And they're getting hit by a double whammy right now because they're having to deal with all of the increases in the construction costs, but they're also much more debt constrained. And so the interest rate increases really create a significant cost burden on these projects. And there's a lot of projects in the pipeline. So as I was meeting with ADOH 2 weeks ago through the Housing Coalition, they asked me to put together a one-page fact sheet on the status of the affordable housing projects in Arizona. And so I called every affordable housing developer I know. So the list of companies that I talked to is down here. There's about 50 companies, I think, that participated in this survey. And I tabulated the results. So the top half of this form is from the National Low Income Housing Coalition. It's from June, I believe. It's their June data. So it basically defines the issue, which I think we all know. We've got almost 194,000 homes in Arizona, which are low income. We have a shortage of affordable units of about 144,000 units. You can see the breakdown of incomes and what incomes are housing cost burdened. And then the pipeline is basically the tabulation of the results of the survey. So there are 108 projects in the pipeline across the state, 14,632 units. You can see the total development cost of all these projects is almost $5 billion. And if you do the math on it, it comes out to almost $310,000 per unit. So first of all, that's a huge number. And that's significantly higher than it was a few years ago. And then everybody basically gave us what they thought their financial need was. So I categorized the projects in a number of different ways. So projects which are under construction are basically going. The financial need on a lot of these is deferred developer fee. A lot of developers have had to put in additional cash to basically beat the gap. And so and then some of them are dealing with cost increases after construction has begun. And so it was interesting to me that need was as high as it was. And then we have projects that are in the final approval process, preliminary approval process, and proposed. And basically for all of these, the criteria that I asked was that the developer have site control, so that there's a lot of other stuff in the proposed phase where they said, well, I'm evaluating this property or I'm evaluating that property. I didn't put those into the study. I wanted to make sure that this was a list of projects where they had site control, they had definition on the number of units and a pro forma. And the further out you go, the more guesswork there was in terms of the financial need, because these proposed projects are 2024 deals, most of them. So they're making assumptions on what's going to happen with costs, what's going to happen with interest rates, what's going to happen with rents. There's a lot of stuff. So the further out you go, the less accurate and the more guesswork that's involved. So then you can see the difference between the 4% LIHTC projects and the 9%. So there are 57 4% LIHTC projects, 45 9%, and then there's 6 which are other projects. Some of these are home ownership projects. They're funded through other programs besides the 4% and the 9%. So kind of focusing on these two, a couple things that really popped out to me were, first of all, the number of units generated from the 4% is much higher than the 9%. So the average project size on the 4% is roughly 200 units, whereas the average project size on the 9% is 80 units per project. And as we would expect, our percent shortfall and shortfall per unit are much lower on the 9% than they are on the 4%. So the 4% average shortfall is $33,951 per apartment, which makes up about 10% of the cost. And that's about half on the 9%. And then looking at regions, Pima County has a larger average shortfall per unit than Maricopa County, but it's lower than the rural projects. So the rural projects are getting hammered. What's happening in Pima County is our area median income is roughly, for a family of 4, is roughly $10,000 less than the Phoenix area median income. So our incomes are lower, which means that we can charge less rent, and our construction costs are actually higher by about 5 to 10% in Pima County than they are in Maricopa County. So the result of that is that we have larger gaps on Pima County projects than Maricopa County. It's harder to develop down here. So, the total financial gap for all of these is $450 million right now. Now, there was a lot of people I talked to who did have some hesitancy in giving me the data because they've been out there fundraising for their projects, trying to bring in sources. And they said, well, we made representations that this would get us across the finish line, but then interest rates have gone up and costs have gone up. So they thought they'd filled the gap, and now they've got a new gap. So I told everyone that we were not going to share the specifics of it, but this is going to be a fluid number, and it's going to change over time. This is what we anticipate the gap is right now. In 2-3 months, that number is going to change. So if the state were to say, okay, we're going to put $500 million to ADOH to support all of these projects based on the timing of these, this is basically how units would be delivered by month. So it would generate about 348 apartments per month between now and the end of 2025. And I guess the thing that's really shocking to me about this is this seems like it's a ton of projects. It's 14,000 units. It's 1/10 of the need in the state. It's a drop in the bucket because the need is so high. I mean, it'll make a dent out of it, but it's not a serious dent. So anyways, I spent about 3 full days working on this. And I think it's got a lot of valuable information. I thought you guys would be interested in it. So.
Can you share that?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to send it to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. This is really, really great.
And Jim, if you share it with me, I'll share it with the commission so we don't break Robert's rules.
Didn't I send that to you already, Sarah? I thought I sent it to you yesterday. I know I sent it to Ann. I'll forward to you right now.
Okay. And Corin did make it back, so just FYI, she's back.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if that's all, Jim, I would like to go back to Corin and for your IID update. Are you finished, Jim?
Yep.
Okay. All right, great. So then we'll go back to the item we missed, which was the update on the IID proposal by Corin.
Thanks, and sorry for being a little late today. I wanted to share an update with the subcommittee on the Infill Incentive District update. So I'm going to share my screen. Hold on a second. Can you guys see a PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I think I mentioned several months back at one of our meetings that we were about to update the Infill Incentive District. I can go into more background on the Infill Incentive District if folks would like, but essentially this is the zoning overlay in downtown and greater downtown really that allows a lot of the development that we see. It allows mixed use development that's very difficult to do in our underlying zoning. It allows more urban style development, and it's facilitated a lot of the housing projects And specifically affordable housing projects downtown, like the Marist, West End Station, 7th Avenue Commons, all of those utilize the infill incentive district. We update it every few years because it sunsets from our code unless it gets updated. And that's what we're in the midst of doing right now, is evaluating the code, making some tweaks, and updating and extending that portion of our code. So one of the things we really looked at this time in our code is how to provide more incentives for affordable housing. And hold on. For some reason, I'm not able to change slides. Hold on just a sec. I'm gonna share again. Technical difficulties. Do you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, we see it.
But it is still not moving. Hold on. Sorry. I think I'm gonna have to do it the less sophisticated way. And not do full screen. You guys still see slides or see them again? Okay. Sorry about that. Can't get it to do full screen. So the big change that we are making is some changes to the code in terms of where we allow residential housing and incentives for affordable housing. So we're really doing two things. One, the infill incentive district actually doesn't allow residential uses in any areas that have underlying industrial zoning, and that's a significant portion of the IID actually. So we are proposing to allow multifamily use on industrially zoned land in the infill incentive district. This is already allowed in one of the sub-districts, the downtown link sub-district, but not the other sub-districts. So we're basically making that more consistent across the entire infill incentive district and creating density standards for that development. And then secondly, we are creating new incentives for affordable housing in those areas. So how this works is, so this map shows you the portion of land in the infill incentive district that is zoned industrial, the kind of gray shaded areas. And it's about 27% of land in the greater infill incentive district. That's the larger area. And 17% of the land in the downtown core has industrial zoning. So right now, no residential use would be permitted in those areas, even if you're using the infill incentive district option. This would change that so that multifamily is allowed. And it would be allowed at kind of comparable densities to what we see in those districts. So it would be allowed in the greater infill incentive district, which is kind of like the Stone and Oracle corridors between Speedway and Grants, you can think of, and going south from downtown along South 6, that's kind of the greater infill incentive district. There, the residential use in an industrial zone would be allowed at R3 densities, which is 36 units per acre. And I believe up to 40 feet. And then in the downtown core, it would be at C3 density, which is 87 units per acre and up to 75 feet. Oh, it says it here, 35 feet, sorry, in the greater infill incentive district, 60 feet in the downtown core. And then secondly, we would create an incentive for affordable housing in those areas. And this would waive density restrictions for any affordable housing development and allow slightly taller maximum building height, up to 75 feet in the downtown core and up to 60 feet in the greater infill incentive district. This would apply to projects that have at least 15% affordable units and affordable at 80% AMI or lower. That's modeled after the Sunshine Mile incentive that we established. And we're really thinking that, we're setting that minimum of 15%, but based on what we've seen, we think this will mostly be utilized by projects that are 100% affordable because it is difficult to finance, can be difficult to finance those mixed income projects that blend market rate and affordable. So really, we hope this will be incentive that will be used by affordable projects, you know, given that we have a focus on this in the Thrive in the 05 area. And that overlaps quite considerably with the infill incentive district. This can be something that can help with some of those goals for the Thrive in the 05 area in terms of new affordable housing. So those are really the key changes related to housing. And there's also some tweaks to the boundaries of the infill incentive district. Largely in Menlo Park and a few in Dunbar Spring. Those are to add some commercial corridors, especially areas where we have historic properties that actually have more protection in the infill incentive district than with underlying zoning. And then to adjust some parcels where they're currently split by the infill incentive district, including the former Nearmont landfill site on Cushing Street. That is a city-owned site with potential for affordable housing. And also some sites along the Stone Ave corridor, kind of adjacent to Dunbar Spring, where we have a lot of split parcels, and Main Avenue as well. So looking at some small boundary adjustments and then some other kind of tweaks to design standards, but really the change to allow residential and industrial and create that incentive for affordable housing are kind of the more significant changes that I wanted to make sure this subcommittee was aware of and let you know about some of the next steps. So we held a number of public meetings last week, got a lot of great feedback and input, and have been meeting with some neighborhood associations. And we are preparing for a study session with the Planning Commission that is scheduled for next Wednesday, October 26th. So feel free to tune in for that. It's a study session, so it's not yet the opportunity for public input, although there is a call to the audience. Should anyone wish to speak, but that's a chance for the Planning Commission to ask questions of staff and get more information and request clarifications and make potentially some recommendations for small tweaks. So that's next Wednesday. We are requesting that the Planning Commission set this for a public hearing on November 16th. So if they do set that for a public hearing, that will really be the opportunity for public comment, where it would be great to hear from you know, folks who might want to utilize the affordable housing incentives and these new provisions for residential development. And, you know, obviously that's opportunity for comment from our entire community, neighborhoods, other organizations who wish to comment, and individuals. So that public hearing would be November 16th at 6 p.m. Again, that hasn't been scheduled, but once it is, I'll definitely let everyone know, but that's the date we are aiming for. After that, depending on the outcome of that public hearing, Planning Commission makes a recommendation to Mayor and Council, and then ultimately it would go to Mayor and Council for their adoption before the sunset date. And we are tentatively looking at December 20th for a Mayor and Council public hearing. So that's the update and the proposal, and would love to get any questions or input.
Thanks, Corin. So that little parcel on Cushing Street, is that definitely moving forward? I know at the public comment session, there was a lot of kind of pushback about that. You think that's going to stay, or is that gonna?
You know, I don't know how, I don't know whether it will ultimately be adopted by Mayor and Council, but that is part of our recommendation to Planning Commission. So yeah, that is the former Nearmont landfill site that's here. The site is split currently, so half the site is industrial. Actually, we have a better map here. Half the site is industrial and is already in the infill incentive district. And this update would allow residential on that portion of the site. And then half of the site is R2 and not within the infill incentive district. So this would allow for a more comprehensive approach on that site, potentially residential development there in the future. Kind of that would depend on the outcome of the Menlo Park neighborhood plan, which we're working on right now. But adding it to the infill incentive district would just create more options in the future. But it is city owned, so the city ultimately has control of what happens there. But yeah, there is concern, especially from like Barrio Sin Nombre and neighborhoods in that area, about the impact of new residential in that area. So that's definitely an ongoing conversation.
So is this the same parcel, the base of a mountain, or no? That where,
No, that's a different site. Glad you asked, because when we had our public meetings, we really tried to point that out, which I neglected to do when I went through this. That is a different site further south. And that site is owned by Rio Nuevo. So the city does not control that site. It is zoned for R1. So does not allow multifamily today, and none of these changes we're proposing would change that. So it doesn't currently allow multifamily. Rio Nuevo and the development team they've started working with has said that they would need to rezone it to do multifamily. And they would be doing that in the future following the Menlo Park neighborhood plan.
is this then the property around Caterpillar? Then?
Yeah, this is just to the west of Caterpillar.
Okay.
Mhm. Yeah, great point. So that's kind of Caterpillar right here.
Yeah.
Seen from above, and it's just west of Caterpillar. It's not the property south of Caterpillar, which is another story, and that's kind of the more archaeologically sensitive and, the culturally significant site south of Caterpillar. It's also not that site.
Thank you.
Mhm. Yeah, there's a lot going on in this area.
So just, you mentioned a lot of multifamily, and one of the things that I was actually going to talk about in my presentation on affordable home ownership is the opportunity for the IID to, does it include home ownership? Are we limited to 15%? Can we ask for more, or you suggest more? I'm not sure what the process is. And can it be also specified as to how much is, multifamily versus home ownership? You identified 80% of AMI, so, which is good.
Yeah, so it would be for both multifamily. It's not on this slide, the bullet, but in the actual text, it does specify that that could be rental or like condo home ownership. And so yeah, it would apply to either.
I'm curious about that bullet point here, the new pre-approval process for affordable housing projects. Is that just for the IID, or is that more broad, like we were talking about in our recommendations earlier?
I'm so glad you asked, because I forgot to mention that, Shay. So that would just be in the IID. And the reason for that is because the IID has this like discretionary design review process, that has been a barrier for some projects that are located in the IID, has made it hard for them to use the IID, even if they had wanted to, because, you have to do the zoning compliance, or show zoning compliance when you're applying for funding. And so that has turned some people off to the IID, because this is seen as kind of a discretionary component. So basically what this would do is allow us to issue sort of a provisional design approval, which is just based on early concepts. You don't have to have fully designed project. And that would be issued by our department so that you can show zoning compliance on a project for funding applications. And then later, once the project is funded, designed, you would still go through the full IID design process.
Right. I mean, I've just always thought in general, this whole overlay is pretty complex. It's pretty complex and not user friendly. I mean, and I thought that part of the process was to try to streamline some of that, but it seems like the changes are pretty minor at this point.
Yeah, they're not huge. So the big changes are these housing pieces that I mentioned. There are a few streamlining things. So right now, one thing is around parking. If you're reducing more than 25%, you have to do a separate individual parking plan, which is kind of this separate parallel process. And we've gotten them to work pretty well together. But one change we're making is that would just be one approval. So it would just be part of your IID application to request even further parking reductions. You would just have to still do a parking study, but it can just be one application, one approval process. So that is something that we did to try to streamline based on what we heard. And then, you know, we made some other kind of just trying to clean up some of the organization of the code, but yeah, at this point, those are the main things we're recommending, is changing the parking and doing the preliminary design approval for affordable housing.
Okay, all right, thank you. Were there any other questions or comments before we move on to the next agenda item? Thank you, Corin. This is great. Thank you.
Thanks.
David?
And I will let everyone know if and when that planning commission public hearing is scheduled for.
I see, David, you have your hand up?
Yeah, one question I want to make sure. You know, you have your affordable housing definition, which is really two parts. For 80% of AMI and housing costs don't exceed 30% of actual income. In the real world in which we live, rents are frequently going to exceed 30% of actual income. You know, if it, assuming there's not a voucher or, you know, either a project-based or a housing choice voucher. And that's perfectly okay under the LIHTC program. The rents can't exceed 30% of 60% of AMI, or if you're using a lower target, 50% of AMI or whatever. But it's 30% of a fixed amount, not the particular renter's income. And it's critically important if you're going to get a single unit built. I'm not talking about a project, I'm talking about a unit. That the definition not require that rent or housing costs, gross rent, not exceed 30%, are allowed to exceed 30% of any particular tenant's actual income, so long as they're within programmatic requirements. Do you follow what I'm saying?
I think so, and basically, we generally will want HCD to be the ones verifying that the project is meeting all the programmatic requirements.
Right, but if you say a programmatic requirement is to qualify, if you say a programmatic requirement is rent cannot exceed 30% of actual household income, you won't get a single taker.
I don't think that's in the code.
Okay. Just want to make sure, because that's how you defined it in that little.
I'll check though. I'll verify that. That's a really great point, David. I appreciate that. And I'll confirm and make sure HCD is comfortable with the definition that we have in our code.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I think that it was only saying affordable housing and the 80% AMI being that maximum limit. So that's the definition in the code. And then I think the 30% got tagged in the definitions and the presentations, because the definition of affordable housing kept coming up. So trying to explain the definition of what affordable housing is and how that's typically, you know, where someone doesn't spend more than 30%. But I think Corin's right, it's not in the code, but we'll verify that. And like she said, I think when projects come through, HCD will be reviewing, you know, to make sure that the affordability is meeting, you know, the intent of the affordable housing incentive.
Okay. But that will be a deal killer.
Yeah, we're not going to try to write in deal killers, David.
I try, and you know, it's. I know you're not trying to, but I want to make sure you don't inadvertently do it.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate that.
All right, that's great. So moving along, do we have any other comments before we move on to the next topic? I don't see any, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to affordable home ownership with Maggie on the floor.
Yay. So if y'all remember, this was something that we kind of pushed for to be on the agenda, but mostly to start talking about homeownership as, to start discussing what it is. I'm wondering if, I guess my request is, and I represent, y'all know, the Pima County Community Land Trust. And would it be helpful to have a discussion at the commission meeting about what a community land trust does, how we work? And also, to Megan's point, HUD approved housing counseling agencies and what we're doing and the support that we need to further promote homeownership. I think in the HAST plan, there has been, I one time brought up the idea of, we're talking about development of units, but also I'm also thinking that it may be a good idea to convert existing housing, home ownership housing to affordable units, and how we can go about doing that. So I did want to talk about the IID and how home ownership can be incorporated into that. Specifically, community land trust, permanent affordability, long-term affordability. It's actually a model that's working. And, I guess that's really what I have to say today. Do we have an understanding of what a community land trust does, how it works? And, also in regards to what was just discussed in regards to, HUD basically defines someone who is housing burdened as anyone who pays more than 30% of their gross income towards their housing cost. And the reality is that when you have low and moderate income households, they don't have discretionary income to, pay more than that. So the more money they pay for housing, the less money they have. And y'all know this, I'm preaching to the choir, the less money they have for, illnesses and food and medication and what have you. So I do think that that's important. I don't know, in the context of what David was talking to Corin about in the idea and those, big multifamily projects, I don't know if he was referring to that specifically. But in Jim's numbers that he presented, that 4 billion, almost $5 billion to produce 14,000 doors, we're talking about a cost per door of like $342,000. I don't know at this point what the median price of a house is, but can we do home ownership for less? Have we done an analysis of that? Is it something to discuss and to, kind of delve into and research?
Sorry, what did you say the base cost for comparison was?
I don't know what it is. I don't know what the median price is right now of a house.
So David, what she was referring to was that that one-page fact sheet. And if you look at the number of units under development divided by the total development cost, it came out to like, I don't remember the exact number. It's like $310,000 a door. It was a big number.
Yeah, that's a pretty good number for a LIHTC unit.
So Maggie's question is, can we do for sale cheap? My gut knee-jerk reaction to that question is yes, you can, but the economics are different. The rent side's different. The pro forma and how a project pencils out is completely different.
And I think the current median price, house purchase price is like $330 in Tucson, but I would agree with Jim that the construction is very challenging.
Well, but it goes back to the point, do we need to construct or do we just need to convert? If we're paying the same amount to build a LIHTC unit, why couldn't we? And I'm just throwing this out there. I'm not, I agree we need affordable rental, we need affordable home ownership, but I'm just kind of looking at the cost, and I didn't realize how I thought there would be more economies of scale for big multifamily projects. So that number really did surprise me because I don't deal with light tech at all. And that it's actually, you know, comparable, if not more than what a single family home costs. You know, should we be also, I mean, it just kind of, it tells me that we really should also be focusing on homeownership. And I get that there's, you know, different, you know, things that we need to think about, and not everyone is ready for homeownership. I get it. You know, so.
Maggie, one of the things I think we talked about before was there's two people I'm aware of who have active developments that are affordable for sale. Foundation for Senior Living and Trellis. So do you want me, I talked to Steve Hastings, and I asked him if he'd be willing to come present to this group how he's doing his deals, and, you know, kind of what are the challenges and things that recommendations that we can make to mayor and council on what would incentivize more of that. Would you be interested in him coming to present next month to this subcommittee?
Yeah, that would be great. I think, you know, PCCLT, we do development, but very small scale, you know. And I am right now, you know, we're doing penciling GG Shea, and I'm like really shocked at the numbers right now. I'm like, what? It just means like you all know, affordable housing is not affordable. And it means that we just have to really find tons of subsidy to make it affordable.
Yeah.
So, and I get that. So yeah, I think though that, and then Jim, you also mentioned in your presentation, just really quick, that construction costs were still pretty high, but I had been hearing, you know, reports that like lumber prices are back down to pre-COVID. So are you seeing, and are we seeing a reduction in construction costs at all?
Overall across, so if you look at it on a trade by trade basis, yes, our framing bids are down. We were seeing framing bids upwards of $40 a square foot when lumber was at $1,600 a board foot. Lumber's down to about $600 a board foot now, but the suppliers, so there's a couple things happening. The suppliers and the truss manufacturers have not dropped their price according to what the manufacturers have dropped their price. So we're not seeing all of those reductions yet. And I think the subs are still pretty busy and they're a little trigger shy. So, you know, the bids we're seeing right now on framing are running $32-$34 a square foot. And for comparison purposes, last time lumber was at 600, which was, I mean, it touched it last year briefly, but it was back in 2020. You know, we were seeing framing bids of $24 a square foot. So apples to apples basis with lumber where it is, we're still up $8 a square foot. Some of that is attributable to labor costs. Labor costs are going up right now. That's a big problem for everybody in construction, especially here because it's so busy. But then the other real issue is that a lot of the other trades are now experiencing significant issues. So concrete is up over $200 a yard. And so our post-tension slabs are now, you know, for a building slab is over $20 a square foot, which just blows my mind. You know, HVAC, electric are both experiencing significant increases right now. Plumbing a little bit lesser degree. So, you know, overall, since February, we've seen about 1% per month inflation on average.
So it's actually going up then, even though we're seeing
Costs go up, yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that that'll come down a little more? I mean, I don't know. I just kind of feel like our economy is kind of.
Well, you know, so we're starting to get calls from some of the single family residential subcontractors. So the residential side is definitely getting hit pretty hard right now. Multifamily side is still blasting forward full steam. So I get on average probably 3 calls a week for new projects. And I basically am telling everybody, no, our backlog is, I have, David, close your ears, but I have like more than double the amount of work we can take on for next year. So I'm anticipating half of the projects or more that are committed to us are going to be going away.
You're still doing mine, dude.
I know, you're a priority, don't worry.
All right.
But so, you know, if it's an affordable deal, if it's an existing customer, those are things that we're talking, but there's a lot of stuff still out there. And so, you know, I think specifically in Tucson, our sub base here is pretty weak. And so we're seeing costs go up much faster in Tucson than we are in Phoenix right now.
And I'll just echo that. I mean, he's building a 77 unit project for us now, and change orders are coming in fast and furious. Yes, lumber went down, and that offset some other costs, but we've already blown through about a third of our contingency reserve. Now I am as I'm sure the project manager is complaining to Jim all the time. I'm on his case about every change order, but you know, costs are just crazy.
Yeah, I think, you know, once we start a project, it kind of locks things in a bit. So, you know, before we go to contract with subs, we're completely at the mercy of the market. And, you know, but once we go to contractor with an owner, we go to contract with all the subs as fast as we can. They get commitments with the suppliers. That locks a lot of stuff in, and most companies are still willing and able to hold prices. We're ordering product early as possible. There's a few things. So once we're under contract, we've seen material escalation of you know, 1 to 3% of the total contract typically. But it's that period before you lock everything in that it's still really tough out there right now.
All right, so
Megan, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I have sort of a naive question, but I mean, I do agree with Maggie. Like, one of the challenges right now is obviously supply for home buyers, especially affordable home buyers. And even with, you know, when they're approved through our agencies, there's income limits and we're able to help with down payment assistance, but they're maxed out and there's definitely not homes that are within their approved amount that they've been qualified for. So I am curious, like in the P-CHIP, I know there's a mention about expanding affordable home ownership and trying to reduce barriers, but I'm not certain, like within this group, the context of this group, we obviously do have a lot of folks that are more familiar with LIHTC, and that I think is really important, but is there anyone in the community that we could maybe reach out to that's more knowledgeable about, you know, trying to either incentivize or have set asides for some of these, you know, home builders to have certain percentage of them set aside for low income. I don't know what other maybe communities have done. It's not something that I've done a lot of work in just yet, but I would say that I agree with Maggie that there's a big issue right now with just having availability, and that because of costs, I think is obviously going to continue to grow. It does not pencil, I think, for home builders to be doing incredibly low, you know, they're incentivized to be building much higher, much more expensive homes. So I'm just curious if maybe we can tap into someone that could maybe talk with us more about it, or there's a potential opportunity there.
well, I feel like I'm always harping on but the land trust is a proven model. You know, we have right now 94 homes in our portfolio, and we're able to, and you know, we're able to help people. These are permanently affordable. So when one person sells it, you know, there's a shared equity component. I think that, you know, we need to discuss these long-term affordability options. I think, you know, Megan, you're saying, you know, you're having difficulty finding home. There are no homes for the people that we serve. And I get that. Yet we have some, And if we had more, it would be nice. So how?
Well, but that's, I guess, the point is how do we
How-
increase that
Yeah,
supply
how
and
do we
not,
scale that up? Yeah.
and
How
how,
do
and
we-
I don't know how often you are actually, how, you know, what is the churn, yearly churn of availability of homes? I would assume if 94 and you're, that's small, you know.
Yeah,
we're-
used to be 10% and then now it's much lower because, you know, of instability, COVID, people just are not moving and I don't blame them, right? So it used to be around 10%. So, but I do believe that we need to kind of build this, you know, how do we build a scale? How do we increase the production of affordable home ownership? I think one of the things that, you know, in talking to Corin and Shay and talking about ADUs is really you know, we need to look at, we need to increase density, right? And people in you know, here in the community want single family homes detached with big yards. And that's the part of the discussion I think that, you know, we need to start educating community on. You know, we get so many phone calls from neighborhoods in the Sunshine Mile and then, you know, oh my God, they're going to build this, you know, how do we preserve affordable home ownership here? And at the same time, you need to talk to community about, we need to start thinking differently about home ownership. It doesn't have to be, you know, the single family house with a, you know, yard. And I'm wondering if that's part of the discussion is how do we start getting the NIMBYism? How do we address NIMBYism in regards to increased density, especially for home ownership? And, you know, and would that improve affordability? I don't know. Or maybe not. So is that something, I mean, people are always bringing up condos as affordable home ownership. And so how do we do that? And who can talk to us about how that can be done? Does anyone know anything?
I have an idea from what Megan was saying. So in Flagstaff years ago, when Andrew Rael was the housing director there, before he went to the state, they had for private developers, a portion of the development had to be, a certain percentage of it had to be affordable housing. So if you wanted to get through planning and zoning, then you know you were going to commit to this. And I know that had to happen because my brother builds golf courses with housing, and so he was not happy with that. But so that was one thing. The other thing I think can happen regarding single family is, you know, to talk to the Southwest Housing Group. Oh my God, their name just went out of my head. Southern Arizona Home Builders Association. Yeah. You know, and get their backing, you know, and you have to start out small, you know, but it can grow once it, you know, it's established. But to talk to them about, you know, approaching home builders for this piece too, especially when you talk to them about the fact that the middle class, lower middle class now is homeless. And that people who are working are, you know, living in their vehicles or with other relatives, you know, those kinds of things they like to hear. But what Flagstaff did and talking to Saba might be a direction, you know, to start. And I think that there are a multitude of single family housing options that people could have, just traditional, through a home builder, through a community land trust, you know, through you know, other means as well, because it is a changing market, and the youth in these markets, the younger adults, they're the ones that have to be reached to want to be into housing, because a lot of them are preferring rental housing right now.
So Marianne, are you saying basically like it isn't that kind of like inclusionary type of zoning kind of sort of, except for not at a state level, but basically you're saying approach developers to say, hey, you're gonna dedicate a certain amount of units to be affordable to XYZ, whatever is decided. And, okay. All right, well, that's the thing. So I don't really have anything else to say other than Jim, you're gonna approach somebody to come and talk to us about how they're doing affordable homeownership at a much larger scale. It seems like, you know, Habitat does what, 10 units? We do maybe 4 or 5 units. I don't know what other affordable housing provider. Marianne, you do it, but you do rental. But under homeownership, who else is developing affordable homeownership in the community?
Well, at the affordable housing conference for ADOH, there was this whole manufactured modular trend that can be part of community land and not. And Ken Anderson, who is the president of the Arizona Manufactured Housing Association, was there, and I think he says that, you know, you can build using these modular, which are much better than they used to be, anywhere between $108,000 and $125,000. So, you know, about $72 a square foot, all site in $82 a square foot. So the role of manufactured housing can affordably increase what's available in the stock. And I think that he would be a great person to come into not just this meeting, but the whole committee meeting and talk about what's happening in affordable housing. It was a fabulous learning experience for me. What this Clayton Built Homes was saying, that this type of housing is more appealing to younger whole households and first-time home buyers and millennials. So I have Ken, he is with Arizona Department of Housing, as it turns out. He has been with the Urban Institute, and I have his number and his email, and I'm happy to ask him to join in one of our meetings unless somebody else would like to ask him. But I think this would be a great educational.
That sounds good. Yeah, definitely.
I would just ask that we stagger those 2 speakers. So maybe the first one would be the one, Jim, you mentioned, and then the following meeting, we could have another person come. But I feel like, so I had sent an article, I don't know if it got out to the group, but I found a really encouraging article about ADUs and the state of that in California. They've built over 60,000 units in just the past 4 years. And they've seen like this accelerated growth curve and then amount of production of units. And I do really feel like density is a huge issue, and basically and especially in inner cities like Tucson, where we have nowhere left to build out. I mean, the boundary is already pretty defined. So, and vacant parcels are getting harder and harder to come by. Again, I think the viability of looking at duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, I'm seeing I don't know if you all are familiar with the Tres Pueblos housing development here on the south side, but they did duplexes. So it looks, from the outside, it looks just like any typical suburban development, but some of the houses are just split like right down the middle. And I just thought it was like a super easy, low rise solution to density. And I think that more ideas like that, and again, just getting those allowable within zoning and could make a huge impact. And ADUs are for rental only. Yeah, no, they are, it's all rental housing right now, but that's again, another issue you could look at with home ownership is like, well, could you split the lot? Then if you follow that thread, if we split the lot, then we have to reduce minimum lot sizes. There's, you start getting down the zoning rabbit hole.
it's based on
Well, in those, in those, in those cases.
The British miniseries is terrific.
David, you're on.
David,
David, you're next.
In those cases, when I was working for Community Services of Arizona, we built duplexes that the family owned, and then they rented one out. So they lived in one, they rented in one, and that was a pretty good model. And you can put, you know, like depending on the lot size, you can put several duplexes on the same lot. Yeah.
I lived in a, but I like the idea also of, you know, I lived in a, I guess it was a duplex when I, you know, way back in the day. And I owned that unit, and then it was attached to another duplex. And this was off of over on the northwest side, or west side actually. And I liked that. I mean, it was cute little 2-bedroom, 1 bath, you know, with a carport and a little yard and what have you. But I really think, you know, and I don't know, Corin, maybe this is something that we need to, how do we, you know, you know, and having these discussions with you and with Shay and talking about ADUs, I really think the density conversation is, you know, is so important, and really educating community as, you know, hello, you know, we have these affordable housing. The other thing I was thinking about is also talking about, you know, the history and just as an educational model, trying to sway the NIMBYism is how really zoning and land use has created a lot of the affordable housing issues that we have today, which I feel is like zoning. So I don't know, I really feel like these types of conversations are so important to try to, you know, get community buy-in, get mayor and council buy-in to, you know, really look at, you know, tiny homes or whatever it is that we're looking at. But you know, we need to start addressing, you know, the density issues to create more affordability. I think that's the biggest issue right now.
Okay, I just need to get permission, and when you guys, I'm trying to email Ken now. I need permission, like for when to invite him.
Yeah, so I would put him not for this. So that would be, we're in November, we'll have Jim's guest, and then how about for December? Will we be breaking for December?
And is it going to be the housing committee meeting or the full commission?
I would just put it on this meeting for this
Yeah.
meeting. But how about for January, just so we have some?
Is that too far out?
I don't think so. We're already practically at the end of the year. I'm already seeing Halloween and Christmas decorations everywhere. I
Okay.
think we should just plan for the new year, and that way
So that's what day in January would that be?
I don't know what we're now with our schedule, where we're at, but
Well, we're doing is this the 3rd?
Today's
Yeah, the meetings are the third Wednesday
Wednesday.
of every month. So when you're scheduling out, you could try to see if he's available for a third Wednesday.
It's
of
the
the month.
18th, January 18th.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay,
all right. And that's all. I don't have anything actually ready to present on zoning. Was there any other discussions? I actually feel like we could merge the topics. I feel like for me, really, the way I see it is in terms of scale. You have big projects and small projects, and that's how I see the divide. The rental versus homeownership to me seems less of a, I don't know, less of a deal breaker, because in the end, you're trying to think about how to produce units and how to develop a project. And to me, the big divide in the difference is in the way you develop is scale. And there's different strategies and different zoning, provisions you'll need for small versus large. I mean, kind of to a degree, but kind of not. I mean, I don't.
Well, except for that homeownership builds wealth.
The what?
Homeownership builds wealth. And if you're gonna lift people out of cycles of poverty and healthy,
Right, but in terms of developing a project, I mean, the outcomes, yeah, I see how those are different, but in terms of developing a project, I feel like, I do feel like the real divide is a scale issue, how you go about trying to finance, develop, a single family home versus a duplex or triplex. You're in a certain realm of finance versus when you're looking at the multifamily. And that's to me how I see it, but at the end of the day, and I've worked on now projects of both sizes, and I feel like you're at the end of the day, when it comes to zoning, you're kind of going to be asking for the same things. It's either you want the parking reductions, you want the setback, reductions, you want the flexibility really with projects. And that's where I feel like it's not so different in the end when you're looking at what you need out of zoning and what you need as far as I'm just as frustrated, if not more, with our zoning code, working on remodels and casitas and additions and ADUs and guest houses. I mean, it's that tool to me is just as inflexible at a small scale as it is at a large scale.
Meg, I want to say something about building wealth. I think that people who are in transition, who are moving into apartments, if there's, good support services and, it's stable housing for them and they stay put, they do build wealth. And I think in the last 10 years that we've had Glenstone Village, we've had at least one and sometimes two households purchase housing. So I think in the spectrum of building wealth, you do need to include rental housing.
There's an actual model where, renters actually build equity of some sort. I know there's something like that where a portion of their payment can be saved for down payment on a house. I know there's something like that. Or I don't know, I'll look it up. There was an actual presentation that I attended way back in the day.
Yeah, we don't have that kind of a model. It's just,
Yeah.
we do have people increasing their incomes, and I think stability and good housing allows for that. So I do believe it does build wealth.
Well, especially affordable housing
Mhm.
for low-income people who then, they'll be able to save their money. I think absolutely. So that's it for me. I mean, I have nothing else, so I don't know if we're past this.
Yeah, we're at
Yeah,
5:40.
you're at yours. We're at your, okay.
I mean,
Alright.
I didn't cut you off, Maggie, because I don't have anything prepared to present today, and I didn't get any specific feedback. We discussed what I already wanted in Jim's presentation earlier, which was to get something moving forward as far as a recommendation. So I think we're good on my end. I don't have anything more to present. I think we can call the meeting. Let me see what else we have here on the agenda.
We just had HCD updates and
Oh, okay.
just talking
Yes.
about the next meeting. So the full commission meeting's tomorrow, so we'll see you all tomorrow. We've got a good agenda and I'll be presenting on the HAST. So there's going to be a lot of updates on what we've accomplished so far, like what Jim has in his memo, but also, showing off the implementation tools. So definitely come tomorrow to watch that. And then our next meeting for the subcommittee is November 16th. And then I think the next meeting for the full commission will be November 3rd again as well. So that's all we have for updates.
Sarah, as
Jim?
a point of clarification, would it be good to have your presentation go before the subcommittee updates, or because if we present the recommendations during the subcommittee update, would it be better to have that after your presentation or before?
Yeah, we could, since the last time we were kind of in the midst of the subcommittee updates. And so I think, and then since, you know, I don't know if any of the things that we have done, you could add into that part of your memo, but I'll try to get you the PowerPoint ahead of time too, so that you can see it, Jim. But that's up to you as the chair. You can totally change things around if you want and if you think it's important.
Yeah, I'm asking for you, but your opinion is, would it be better to have the subcommittee updates after your presentation or before?
Yeah, after is fine.
Okay. All right, we'll make that change.
Okay, and I'll let Neto know too tomorrow when I see him that we talked about it.
There's an AMA meeting tomorrow, which is actually going to be talking about the what was just passed by the city regarding acceptance of income. And I'm gonna be attending that. So I might be in part of the meeting and I might not.
Thank you, Marianne.
All right, well, knock on wood, hopefully we don't have any more problems like our last meeting.
Oh,
I think we're locked down. I think we're gonna be okay. I think we learned our lesson, and this one's gone very well, so.
I was in on Monday morning, we have our weekly staff meeting internally. And that was the first time we were on Zoom, and I was having PTSD, you know, as we were setting that thing up.
yeah, I don't know who they attached to, but I think you got the blame for it.
I didn't do it. I didn't have anything to do with that.
I didn't even have that event on my calendar. So that's why I was like, I don't know what happened. There was like so many glitches, but I don't know. But I missed a scene.
Yes, you did.
You didn't miss much.
It was so confusing because in the chat, Olga was going off, and I was like, that's so not her.
Right, I saw that and I'm
I
like,
was
what?
chatting with her directly. I said, everybody can see what you're typing. I wasn't sure if she was talking to me or what she was doing.
Well, it wasn't just her then. And then I mean, I just, oh my God, I laughed till I cried when this thing was over because it was just like, yeah, we got hijacked.
We were all in shock. I think that was funny.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I could look back and laugh, but it was at the moment it was stressful for me. So,
But other than that, Shay, I think you're good to adjournment.
Are you all done, Sarah? Okay, cool. All right, then we will adjourn the meeting. We're ending 15 minutes early, or almost 15 minutes early. Thank you, everyone.
great. We'll see a lot of you
Okay.
tomorrow.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.